So is the comic industry in bad shape? Well, if you read online, it sure seems so, but that's not. So why the disconnect? Hey there, this is Perch, and it's funny because just saying this topic, just saying, the comic industry is not in terrible shape, will get you downvotes and it'll get you people flaming you, and it just there's people who really want to believe and have become convinced the comic industry is in bad shape. And saying otherwise is like saying I agree with all the kind of nonsense activities that go on in comics, and what people need to do is separate them. And hopefully, before people jump off the video, like in the first minute, they're hearing at least this part of it. You can say, "Hey, the comic industry is, profitable. It's not in bad shape, so to speak, but there's a lot of problems with it. A lot of big problems with it that are really not acceptable. And if they continue, then yeah, the comic industry will be in bad shape." That's a fair statement, and and most importantly, it's a truthful statement. People can have their opinions, and people can. There's personal taste, and there's also facts. The facts are that absolutely the direct market is weakening. Any way you cut it, the direct market is absolutely weakening. Yes, stores are closing faster than they're opening. A couple news sites, one in particular, I just said Bleeding Cool, likes to do the hey, a store is closing, but hey, look, another store is opening, and things are about equal. It's all good. But they will cite about one out of every five closings, and then they will hype every opening. And sometimes it's not even an opening; it's just a rebranding of that store. So it's giving a very false impression. But nothing new for that site. But it is true; these things are a problem. It's true that core flagship titles are not selling what they used to, and they haven't been replaced with new big titles. It's one thing, and this was a trap that people fell into in the 80s and 90s. They're like, hey, the Captain America is not selling as well as it used to. This is terrible. This is a sign that the industry is going down. It's like, yeah, but the X-Men is selling much better. Things change, tastes change, and that is normal. I think there have been some people who have been, they will say, look at what the X-Men sells. It doesn't sell anything close to what it's used to. The industry is a disaster. And, no, that in and of itself is not a problem. Sure, it'd be nice if the X-Men sold high, but if it's been replaced by something else, that is normal. Tastes change and things move around. They always have. The problem in the statement is what's replaced it? What is the top title? And increasingly, certainly with Marvel, and it absolutely looks like DC is now trying to replicate this situation. The thing that replaces them is events, and events are destructive for. Well, okay, let me back up a second. Events sell a lot of copies, and you can't knock that. You can't, come in here and say, events are terrible for stores. They bring in sales. That's true, but what they don't bring in is stability. An event ends, and the buyers for that event end with it. There are usually less pull box customers for events. Customers like to look at comics like subscriptions, so they will hook onto a character or a team. They will tend to buy events off the shelf or ask for it to be reserved last minute. It's hard for a shop to grapple with. So events are, having core titles be replaced by events. Yeah, the money's still sort of there, but it feels more risky to everyone because the event might not catch. Civil War II didn't catch. Secret Empire didn't catch, and it had a huge drop off in numbers. So nobody feels great about the fact that events are now, taking over the top sales charts of the solo titles. It's why if you go into a lot of comic shops and you're really PO'd about Tom King's Batman, you will struggle to get a a manager to agree with you. Yeah, they may agree they don't like the story, but that title's one of the titles that's propping up their shop right now, and it's an ongoing. So, it's you can't look a gift horse in the mouth there. But at the same time, the money is there, the attention is there. The fact, in a strange, perverse way, the fact that two mega corporations own the two big comic companies should be somewhat of a sense of comfort. It means they're not going to disappear overnight. It means they're not going to get themselves into what Marvel found themselves in the 90s, early 2000s. It provides some stability. They're not going to be IDW. So that's a good thing. That's a sign. There, as mentioned before, there's a lot of money flowing around in comics. Sales are people who say sales are plummeting, usually that way too, with that inflection, plummeting, imploding. No, the numbers don't back that up factually. Even when 2016, 2017 were, quote unquote down years, they were down years and they were a struggle. But not, I mean, we're talking a percentage decline. We're not talking like a 20% decline. We're not talking a free fall. We're not talking an implosion. We're talking softness. And softness is harmful. I'm not, yay for softness. It's just the comic industry, by the numbers, by the people who own the companies, by the titles that are getting now merchandised into sponsorship or movies or toys or other licensing deals. That part of the business is quote unquote healthy. I'm doing air quotes here. It's always hard to say that licensing is a truly healthy business because that too has a lot of ins and outs to it. But you know, that's why a lot of people look at you sideways when you say the comic industry is dying. It's clearly not dying, but it clearly is changing. And changing is not always good. Changing can mean less creativity. It can mean less top tier artists getting paid. We're seeing that now. It can mean less attractive offerings for fans as the market kind of transforms a little bit into something that's a little bit more niche. There's a lot of things that transforming and change can bring about that's not positive. And we're going through that change. We don't know whether the end result will be positive or negative. If you're going to talk to an employee of Marvel or DC and say, "Won't you weigh in on how the industry is going to hell?" You know, they're not good luck, to getting somebody to want to engage in that conversation when they're taking their check from one of these big companies. That would be suicide. And this, by the way, some people, one gentleman who liked to kind of reply to me as kind of oh, listen, son, let me tell you how it is. He goes, like, the comic shop owners and the creators and the other people are cowards because they won't accept these problems. Well, okay. I mean, think about that for a minute, because people like to compare at times the comic industry to McDonald's or, a hot dog stand. Let's say you work for McDonald's, and let's say you don't like, they switch beef vendors and you think the new beef is crap. Um, would you tell customers walking in the door, "Hey, just so you know, this hamburger is garbage"? You wouldn't do that unless you were an idiot. You wouldn't do that because one, you'd lose your job. Two, it's not professional. And who's it helping? You got to send your customer off to Burger King. The whole thing doesn't make sense. So a little bit of again, I always have to disclose things with a million disclaimers because people take things very literally. I'm not saying that the poor behavior and the flaming and the war and all that kind of crap is in any way whatsoever at all, underline, bold, in any way acceptable. It is absolutely not acceptable. But it is one person. It's not indicative of an industry. It's some joker who, in the test of time, will be rolled out of the industry. I mean, even people like we've heard all the comments and yeah, self-admitted Mark Wade, who's made kind of crazy statements. Has been in the industry for a very long time, and it's seemingly getting crazier as more time goes by. Um, Eventually, things catch up to them. And unfortunately, in life, things don't always catch up to people right away. You kind of wish that the bad people, the snarky people, the people who are out to kind of cause damage to others, that use kind of underhanded tactics, you kind of hope they get rolled out quickly. But that's not always the case. Some people hang on. Some people, this could give me a downvote. Some people become president. Mm. Actually, I think that comment probably applies to the last like 4 or 5 presidents. I mean, it's not like hey, here's a nice, honorable person, and now they're president. We tend to reward things. We reward people, at least for a while, by being a-holes. We tend to reward that behavior. Um, I mean, it is what it is. It's our society. But it does catch up to people in the end. and it's not necessarily indicative of the entire institution. So as an example, let's say you don't like a president, whether it's Barack Obama, Donald Trump. See, I covered both ends there. Let's say you don't like one of those two people, and you're really frustrated with them, and you think it's they're doing a terrible job, underhanded, lying, cheating, whatever, all of that. You don't give up on the presidency, the concept of having a president. At least I hope you don't. You can have somebody who's a bad person who somehow got to a position of power and is maybe abusing that power or being ridiculous. And it doesn't mean you throw out the entire industry unless you are a nut. And there certainly are people who have said, hey, there's some comic pros who are jerks, burn the whole comic industry down. Or burn it all down. We're going to do just, crowdfunded and nothing else from now on. There are some people who say it, but nobody serious says that. Nobody who's at all understands anything. That's just this kind of crazy comments. It's yelling fire in a crowded theater kind of comments. Um, so you still have somebody who's a bad person. You can still call it that behavior. You should call it that behavior. And history does have a way of catching up to those people in most cases. Sometimes after they die, but it does happen eventually. But the institution is still sound. I don't know. Comics is funny, as we've talked about. I mean, there's like more than 100 videos we've talked in and around and all parts of the comic industry, and it's a funny industry. And like a lot of other industries, it goes through changes, and we are going through a very substantial change right now. And it's there's a lot of different people looking at that, and some people are adapting well. Some people are, clinging for dear life to kind of the old industry. Some people are not recognizing that there's a change going on across the board. And that, unfortunately, that is normal when you have a change. And it's scary when we go through changes. And at the same time, you can also say, is this change necessary? Like, did the comic industry need to go through this change? I mean, I'd argue, and maybe this is a long video, I want to stretch this one out too far, but I think comics started to trigger changes way back, like pre the first Iron Man movie. The acquisition happened, and Disney acquires Marvel, and DC starts to get wrapped up in more kind of corporate ownership and other things. And they started to institute some changes, some cost cutting here, some different ways that kind of editorial was going to be leading things. The shift from the writer being much more powerful than the artist. A lot of changes started to happen to comics, and I think it was arcing and vectoring to being more of a niche market business. I remember a lot of people saying this back in 2002, 2003, of the comic industry is becoming, we're really trying to aim for survival. And survival means higher priced books and more of a niche. We're not going to, go for the big wins of mass sales. We're going to go for, you know, almost kind of what Funko's original model was, where we're going to go for a collector market and we're going to kind of steer there. And then, kind of by surprise, the Iron Man movie took off. The media attention, superheroes was what Hollywood needed to blow up, to have that next big rise. And so that attention happened, and a lot of people just started focusing on that, and companies focused on that, and attention went there. And the kind of steps that the comic industry was taking were now the wrong steps. They were taking steps for kind of bracing themselves for survival in a collector's market, and suddenly, what do you know? It becomes kind of a big pop culture phenomenon, and it was kind of too late to turn the ship around. So things got very awkward. I think if you could go back in time and the comic industry knew what was going to happen with all of the money and the attention and everything that was going to go down, I would bet you that they would have held the prices back. We wouldn't have seen the comic cover prices go up as much as they have. We would have seen more attention be kind of focused back on the newsstand. We would have seen more. It would have been a very different business if people had known what was about to happen with Hollywood. But unfortunately, it kind of wandered into a different place. And it's once you go somewhere, as we talked about before, it's very hard to turn around and then change course and go back, particularly when you're talking about things that hit financials, either cover pricing or pay or contracts or anything else. So The comic industry is doing well, but there are a lot of problems in it. And it's actually a testament to how well it's doing that the problems aren't causing more damage. And I think that's the thing to take away from all this. Long video, we're about to wrap this up, but there are problems. The problems still exist. The problems are like, and I hate to use this analogy, but it's like a cancer in the body, and the body is still running around living. The body can be successful. An athlete can go on and win the Super Bowl, and lurking somewhere inside of them is cancer, and eventually that's going to grow and cause real havoc unless there is intervention. And it's very hard if you are in the Super Bowl, if you are an athlete and life is great and you have no problems, how motivated are you to want to go and do that intervention? It's hard to justify making radical changes when things look good. And generally speaking, things look good. This is the big disconnect between a lot of the comments online and the businesses, because if you're inside the business, a lot of the things look good, especially at the top. Now, the further down you go, the worse it kind of looks. I mean, a lot of people are way underpaid for what they should be getting. But again, a lot of these people do not have context. They've gone from starving to, not starving, and they haven't lived in a world where they could actually be wealthy. That escapes them. That's one of the problems in our society in general, with kind of how millennials have reacclimated to pay and other things. It's like, hey, you could be doing better, but you have no context to what better looks like. So anyway, that's a lot of noise I threw at you. So hopefully you got something out of it. I enjoyed talking to you anyway. Hey, throw me a comment. Would love to hear what you think. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification, and most importantly, oh yeah, follow me on Twitter, Comic Perch. That too. That's not the most important part. The most important part is thank you for listening. I'm glad you're here.